a pre-existence before that.
As I said, I don't believe that the Big Bang is necessarily the creation of any matter or energy.
I don't believe in the Big Bang as a whole thing, for me.
Sure.
Not necessarily believe in the Big Bang, but my point is, many people when they want to discuss about, for example, the existence or something like that, they always bring this idea to talk about the Big Bang.
Yes.
And as someone who maybe, in terms of science, they said there is an overwhelming information about that the Big Bang occurred at certain point, in the history. Now, according to them, and now here, based on this, they don't believe that the universe was eternal based on this, because they said it has a starting point. Because, as you know, that this universe, so since the universe is expanding in a way, and the expansion of the universe, that means there is a starting point that it started. Now, that starting point, it confirms that the universe is not eternal. That's the thing here. That's what we are. What even according to the people who believe in the Big Bang, so it's not necessarily eternal.
Can
And
I
again,
make a distinction?
and actually, the expansion of the universe confirms that the universe is not eternal. It has a starting point.
Can I make a distinction in my view?
Yes.
So I believe there is an origin of the universe as we can know it, and then there is the universe in general, right? So before the Big Bang, because the Big Bang was the creation of energy, space, and time as we know it, right? We can't have evidence or information before it. That doesn't mean that the universe didn't exist before that point, but merely I can't have information about it.
Okay. Now again, you see here, that's the thing here. When you said I don't have information about it,
Yeah.
so the same thing here. What we say here, since this universe, at certain point it started. If that certain point that started, it must have something powerful to start it. Correct?
I don't believe it was started.
So it didn't start.
Yeah, as I said, I believe it's eternal, but just merely changing.
But how does it make sense if it's eternal? How does it make sense about the expansion of the universe?
Yes.
Again, it doesn't make sense.
It does. So say you have a balloon, right? And you blow into that balloon and it expands. Now, when you release the air, it goes back down again to a smaller balloon, and if you suck, it turns inside out, and then it keeps expanding again.
So you need an external.
So who's you?
Who's you?
Sorry.
Yeah. So which means you need an external energy to influence that. Correct?
No, I believe that energy is preserved. So in space, right? If I just throw a ball in space, it will just continue forever because there's no friction to lose energy. And I believe that's the way.
Actually, they don't believe that the universe is empty. It's not necessarily empty. So it's not empty. Even there are particles, there are substance as well in the universe. So not necessarily it's empty. It's not absolute emptiness. Yeah. Even according to many scientists. But that's not our discussion. Again, you confirmed with the example that you brought that there is an external power, has to be there in order to do. Otherwise, bear in mind. Otherwise, if the universe is able to start itself and to reduce itself by itself, that means the universe has itself, which means it has to pre-exist before its existence. It has to decide certain things which is before. And again, this doesn't make sense. So it has to have consciousness, which is not there to decide to do things or not to do things. And based on what? This singularity that you brought the example. Based on what? On what?
What is my evidence for the singularity existing?
Yes.
The background radiation that we measure all around us. So when you turn on a TV, right, you see that static? That's background radiation that it's measuring from that original Big Bang. It was an explosion,
that Big Bang,
Yes.
again, you see here, again, that Big Bang, you said this is the production, you're talking about Big Bang. Where the Big Bang happens?
Yes.
Where?
Well, in the center of the universe as we know it.
Do you see the point? Which means the universe exists inside the universe? You're talking about the universe.
The universe
One
is
second.
expanding, right? You agreed with me.
I agree.
Yeah.
But there is a problem. Now here you said the Big Bang happened, according to you. Where did it happen?
In the center of the universe as we know it.
So the existence of the universe,
Yes.
the existence of the universe as a whole, let's say, I will not say about initiated, re-initiated by the Big Bang, according to you. So it was re-initiated in the space itself, which means which means you initiate yourself inside yourself.
It's like the balloon again, right? Where does the balloon start to expand, but in the center of the balloon when you blow into it?
You see the point? You didn't get my point. When the universe shrink into certain thing,
Yes.
it exists inside something.
It creates the space itself.
No,
Well,
because
we're
when
talking about the creation of space.
yeah. So when it goes back to singularity, as you mentioned, so it exists inside something,
No, it doesn't.
in the emptiness.
All right, yes, you got it, right? There is void.
That's nonsense.
No.
Emptiness means the absence of everything,
It's not actually.
which is nonsense.
So when we talk
Do you know what
about,
means emptiness?
Yeah, well, yes, but there's many different senses of emptiness, right?
Okay.
So when we talk about, is this empty? Because there's air in this, right?
Yeah, that's why.
We call it empty, but it's not really empty.
Yeah, so that means it's inside something.
Well, you can talk about void, or like true void, where there's literally not even distance or time or something. But in space as we know it, if I'm talking about the space between me and the sun, there's distance there. There's time there, right?
That is
And
not.
that's a thing.
That is. Listen to me. Try to understand my point. My point is, when everything shrinks. By the way, can you call Subboor, please? Find Subboor for me. I think he is there somewhere there, but try to find him. So, you see, going back to the same point which I am trying to make. Now here, when the universe shrinks into certain point, again, that shrinking is inside something. It cannot be inside nothing.
I believe
nothing-
it's inside nothing. I believe that when
So,
we're describing the universe,
Let's
it is
use
expanding.
your own logical argument. Can nothing produce anything?
I don't believe nothing produced anything.
Good. So if it's inside nothing, that means it's inside. It can't be inside nothing, because nothing, the absence of everything, including the space. You understand the point?
Well, obviously,
If it has something, that means it's not the absence of everything. When you say the emptiness, meaning when the universe is inside nothing, nothing defined as the absence of everything. Yeah, that's what you mean. Yes.
I'm not trying to contradict myself. I just meaning the
So
void
if there
around-
is something, if there is nothing, has something in it, that means it is something, basically.
So if you want me to
Which
say
literally
everything
contradict?
speaks-
Which literally contradict what you said?
Pardon?
Which contradicts what you said? Basically, when you said this universe shrink, so it is shrink in the emptiness, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
This is your
Hey, how's it
yeah.
going?
Hi, what's your name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas.
Subboor.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, basically we are discussing about the Big Bang and the existence of the universe, certain things. So we came to the point, one of the things he said, that I asked him, when the Big Bang shrink, for example, he believes the universe is eternal. So it keeps shrinking and, and expanding, shrinking, expanding, yes?
Yes.
And I said to him, so if it shrink to the singularity, as he said, so it should be inside something, yeah, to shrink in. And then he said, no, it's inside the emptiness. I said, okay, if it's inside, yeah, am I quoting you right, in the emptiness?
If I can just be very specific,
Yes.
I believe the universe itself, in its expanding and shrinking, is creating all sense of container that can exist, right? So outside the universe, it's just void. It's not expanding into anything. It is just the creation of space itself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So, when it comes to this conversation, Nicholas, are you speaking from an empirical perspective or philosophical perspective?
An empirical perspective. Space is expanding.
Okay, now what I would say is it's probably best to speak of these things from a philosophical perspective rather than empirical, because we don't have empirical evidence to adjudicate between different models right at the beginning.
You disagree that space is expanding?
No.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I asked you, the argument that you're making, is it philosophical or is it based on empirical evidence?
Empirical evidence.
You said empirical evidence.
Yeah.
I'm saying there is no empirical evidence, because what we have, when we go right to the beginning of the universe,
Yeah.
physics turns into philosophy. So the discussions you're going to have are not empirical.
I don't believe so. We have redshift, and we would need an explanation for real-world phenomenon
Right.
if we didn't have this material evidence to explain it.
Redshift we are observing,
Yes,
Okay.
it's an observable phenomenon.
but we don't observe the beginning of the universe. That's not an observation. That's not empirical. That is theoretical and philosophical.
It's deduction.
There you go. So it's not empirical.
Deduction is a question of empiricism.
Not necessarily.
That's math.
Yeah. So when it comes to
Theory of
when
math.
it comes to say Pythagoras' theorem that you deduce, you create it from first principles.
Well,
You derive it from first principles, like any formula.
there's no real principle. It's really just sort of the conservations of logic as we know it.
Yeah, that is not empirical. That's a philosophical discussion.
It isn't. Logic is empirical and demonstrable.
No, it's not.
No.
Logic is not empirical.
It is. How can you show me a violation of real-world logic?
You're putting the cart before the horse. For you to make a scientific induction or inference or theory, you need to presume maths and logic.
But no, when we use math and logic, right, we're merely describing the rules as they demonstrate themselves in the empiric.
No,
Right?
I'll give you some evidence for this. Is causation known through empiricism or is it known a priori?
Is it known through empiricism? Yes.
Okay, so if you see an effect,
Yes.
do you say an effect has a cause because of empirical evidence, or do you say an effect has a cause because of a priori philosophical assumptions?
It's because of evidence.
No, it's not. Because causality is known a priori before empiricism.
No, it's part of the empiric. I'm
Okay,
standing here,
so-
time is moving
So,
forward.
so
and
let's try something.
yeah.
This translation of the Quran, would you agree this is contingent?
Contingent upon what?
As in it has limitations, it didn't always exist, it could have been a different way.
Sure.
Okay. Does this have a causation behind it?
Did something cause this to exist? Yes.
Okay, good. Have you seen the evidence for it, or are you assuming it has a cause?
I've seen the evidence that it would have a creation.
No, this particular book.
Yes.
Have you
Did
seen?
you see them printing
did
it?
you see someone printing it, creating it?
No.
Sure, you didn't. So you took this and you made an assumption using an a priori principle.
No, I use deduction.
Yeah, that's a priori.
There was no assumption made.
No.
All books are created by people.
No, but that idea that you just said right now, deduction, is a priori. It's before empirical evidence.
No, it's from empirical evidence.
Okay, but you just proved me right now. You said this has a cause. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Have you seen the cause?
Well, I've seen what causes it.
No. Have you seen what caused this?
Not that specific
No.
instance, no.
Okay. Are you assuming there definitely is a cause?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not empiricism.
It is.
It's not.
It is. It's conservation of mass.
No, it's not. This is known to have a cause because of a principle of deduction, which is a priori. Causality is a priori. Causality is not known through empiricism. Causality is known before empiricism.
When we're talking about empiricism, we're
Do you
talking
define
about
empiricism? Define empiricism.
Okay, good. Good. That's a very good point.
Let's go back to foundation.
Yeah. Empiricism is the use of the senses to come to inferences. Okay? So you are using your senses. I am looking at that particular tree and I'm deducing from that tree that the leaves are green, photosynthesis is taking place. This is all empiricism. So the application of reason to the natural world is empiricism. Okay? So when it comes to causality, causality is not known through empiricism. Causality is known prior to empiricism.
I think there's some definitions being played around with.
Sure.
So you wouldn't say that the empirical world merely exists within my immediate gaze, right? Like when I'm asleep, the world doesn't cease to exist.
I think you're getting confused here. You are speaking from a definition's point of view that empiricism is known through the senses. You agree with this, right?
Well, I would say the empirical world exists despite my personal senses.
Right. So now you're moving on to a different point, which is, does something exist if it's not being observed?
Yes.
That's a totally different philosophical point.
It explains the book, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You are speaking about Bishop Berkeley's view of if something is not being observed, does it exist or not? That's a totally different point to what we're speaking about.
I'm just saying that it is in the empirical world.
Okay, let's step back a bit. Like my friend just said, I gave you a definition of empiricism.
Yes.
Do you firstly agree with that definition?
I wanted to expand upon its definition.
Okay, go ahead and define it.
So, yes, it is the world as determined by senses, but not just my personal senses, but human senses in general, right? Humans with our senses go about, we document, we create encyclopedias about the world, right?
Okay.
And then we transmit that information to each other. Even if you haven't personally sensed it, it is the senses of others and us collectively that makes empiricism as it is.
But we were not there in the Big Bang.
Sorry, how is that any different to what I just said?
Well, because it explains the book, right? Because in my case, even though I didn't personally see the creation of the book, it is still empiricism that I know that all books are created.
We need to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
I gave a definition of empiricism. You said you're going to expand upon it.
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand, how did you expand upon it?
So I wanted to make it not just on the personal level, but on the collective level.
All the human
Yeah,
beings.
but I said empiricism is application of reason to the natural world. Whether that's one human or a billion humans, it makes no difference. I'm trying to understand where you disagreed with me on the definition.
In my original answer to your question, you dismissed my answer on the basis that I personally did not see the creation of this book, saying that that's not empirical. Me expanding the definition as you presented to saying that it's everyone's experience that makes the empirical world right, that validates my answer to your original question.
It's a non sequitur. I'll tell you why.
Right.
This particular book, it's the first time you're seeing it in your life, this particular book, right?
Print.
Now, this thing, you have no evidence that somebody else has given you that they saw this being created. You assumed, using an a priori principle, that it does have a cause. So let's just go back to where this conversation began from. You were speaking about the creation of the universe, and you said it's an empirical investigation. I said it's a philosophical one. And the reason it's philosophical is precisely because empiricism is blind when it comes to what happened 14 billion years ago.
There is evidence in the universe. Like when he originally asked me, right, what is the evidence for like the Big Bang? The first thing that I pointed to was background radiation, right? And that we can trace the origin and the history of our universe based on the evidence of radiation, physics, how the trajectory of certain galaxies has moved across the universe, the redshift and the expanding of space, right? And yes, that leads us with math to a particular picture, right? And
Wait, one second. None of what you said I disagreed with. I already told you, when it goes to the beginning of the universe, physics turns into philosophy.
I didn't use any philosophy.
No. I am saying it does, and you just said right now that you need to use mathematics to get there. Now, when you're using mathematics, you're not using empiricism.
Because there's not an observation done by any human being, basically.
Look, let me explain to you why you're wrong about this. Science is the application of the reason to the natural world, and in order to do science, you have to presume logic, you have to presume mathematics, you have to presume testimony. These are presumptions of science, they're not conclusions of science.
You're saying I'm putting the cart before the horse. I'm saying you're putting the cart before the horse.
How?
So you're protesting against me, saying that logic is something that we derive from the world, while you're telling me back that it's something that we merely assume about the world.
I'm saying something different. I'm saying, just listen to this slight nuance. Before you make observations from a scientific perspective, you already have a belief in logic and mathematics prior to observation. That's all I'm saying.
So just being loyal to the concept of science itself, right? When evidence presents itself, it will either validate or give me reason to dismiss an idea. And if the evidence or the circumstance of evidence presents that a certain tenet of logic is consistent, to be scientific means that you should dismiss that law of logic in place for one that conforms better to the model.
Let's test it.
Sure.
What in the empirical world can disprove causality?
I don't believe anything could.
Therefore, it's not empirical.
No, because I would like you to present.
No, you just proved my point. You just proved my point.
I'm asking for evidence.
No. Let's just go back to why you proved my point.
Okay.
What in the natural world can empirically disprove causality? You said nothing.
Because as I said, you're putting the cart before the horse.
No. That's what you're doing.
It's silly. If you present to me a single piece of evidence of causality being violated in the real world, I will abandon that principle. It's purely based off of the demonstration of evidence at hand. If causality doesn't demonstrate itself, then I won't respect
it. No, but you just contradicted yourself. I asked you, is there anything in the empirical world that can dismiss causality? You said no.
Well, I can change my answer.
One second. No, one second.
I agree.
Sorry, my friend. One second. Right now, I just asked you, can anything empirically disprove causality? You said no. Then you said, if something can empirically disprove a causal principle, you will challenge that causality. So you contradicted yourself.
You're misrepresenting what I said.
Okay, what did you say?
So, I have the principle that causality exists, right? It's the tool that I'm using to understand the world right now, right? Now, it's not something that I'm just applying to reality, it's something that I've derived from reality, right? The reason why I'm loyal to this concept of causality is merely because it's demonstrated. The second that it stops being demonstrated, I'll get rid of it.
Okay, so let me just ask you, because this was recorded, so I'm just trying to show your trail of thought, because it's actually confusing. I asked you, can anything empirically disprove causality? You said no.
I've never seen anything of the sort.
No. You initially said no.
Yes, because I
and now you're saying something different. Do you see the contradiction?
No, because I already said I wanted to re-answer it to be more specific, and you said that I could.
No, I didn't say you couldn't. You still are contradicting yourself. I'm going to ask you again.
Just repeat the question to him again.
Can anything empirically disprove causality?
Can anything empirically disprove
The
causality?
the law of causality.
Yes. If it's a confusing question.
It's not really. It's not.
It's a very confusing question. So, if you were to
question fallacy, you put it to
yeah. It puts it to the point of where I'm not even sure what you're really asking me, so I can't give you an honest answer.
No, wait, one second. That doesn't make any sense, because the first time you gave me a confident answer.
Yes, because
and now you're saying I can't give you an answer because it's a nonsensical question. So which one is it?
I didn't understand how you would abuse my answer.
Why to abuse?
I asked you a question. You first said no. I asked you again. You said no. Now you're saying actually it's a nonsensical question.
Yes. So, can I explain how?
Does the question make sense to you?
No, it doesn't.
No,
So it doesn't make sense to you?
So why did you answer
Okay,
first?
then why did you say no then?
What's fallacious argument is making.
Leibniz does not believe in causality in the way that you assume it to be true. Like Leibniz says, everything that happens to something is contained in it. Something does not need to cause it by it interacting with each other. I don't know if you know about Leibniz, but that's just one philosopher who doesn't believe in causation in the way that we just accept it as true.
Okay.
Okay, so going back to the
Let's
point.
go back to the beginning of the universe. You said you have empirical evidence for the cyclical model. I said you don't have empirical evidence. You have, if anything, a philosophical argument.
You just derived the answer, basically, which is hypothesis.
To be more specific again, I will fully admit that I don't have evidence for the cyclical nature of the universe.
Empirical evidence.
Yes, I don't have evidence.
But do you have a philosophical argument?
That's what I believe with the likelihood of evidence.
See, that's where I don't disagree with you. We can have a discussion about the cyclical model from a philosophical point of view, but the reason why I disagreed with you, one second, my friend. The reason why I disagreed with you is because you said you had empirical evidence for the beginning of the cyclical model, and that's why I wanted to correct you.
Well, it doesn't make sense to have a beginning of a cyclical model because it's cyclical. But besides the point.
No, what I mean is,
You were assuming in the beginning this.
The empirical evidence that you claimed you had for the cyclical model, I said was not empirical, was philosophical.
The evidence that I was trying to point to was that there was a Big Bang at all. Not about the nature of it being cyclical or it being the first cause of all the universe.
I heard you in the beginning say that
cyclical.
You believe the universe goes through these cycles.
I did.
Yeah, and you brought the balloon, as well,
And
as an
you
example.
said you had empirical evidence for it, and I said you don't have empirical evidence
Not
for
the
it.
cyclical
That's why we
nature.
went down this little rabbit hole.
Not the cyclical nature, just the Big Bang.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So
Okay, fine.
now we narrow it down. Now here, because in the beginning you said about the evidences about that the universe is like a balloon. By the way, it's recorded, by the way.
Yeah.
Because he said it's like a balloon. You blow air and then expand, then it goes flat, then it expand. These are the example that you were talking in the beginning. Yes.
Yep.
Then you were discussing in the beginning that you didn't mention as a philosophical argument. You were adamant to say that
It's
there is
empirical
empirical evidence for that, where in fact is not empirical evidence. Now here we are discussing. You are narrowing it to the Big Bang.
Yes.
You are narrowing it to that point.
Okay.
You see the point?
Let's have yours then. Let's have yours.
Okay, now.
Let's have yours.
You see here. So you're narrowing it down.
No,
so
we
let's
accepted it.
not.
We accepted it.
Are you with
Let's
him?
have yours.
Are you together?
No.
He's not with you. So
It's all right.
So-
Yeah. Oh wow! Look at this. There we go.
I thought I'd bring some facts.
Yes.
Might help.
Thank you. I was just talking about this, right?
Is this empirical evidence or is this a philosophical
That
point?
is a picture of the theory.
Okay, no. But, okay,
Empirical
that
evidence.
theory.
Supported by empirical
Wait, one
Yeah.
second. I'm asking him now because we've had a few conversations
No, listen,
before.
I've got to say, I think this guy's very good and I can
Okay, he said that there was empirical evidence for the cyclical model. I said no. What do you think?
I'm continually saying I didn't say that.
By the way, we
did
can't.
say that.
By the
No, I
way,
didn't.
can
You
we?
said that at the beginning.
Can we?
No,
Can,
wait.
can I say something? Can I say something? Because the discussion. Can we say something?
we wanna talk to
Listen,
these two, we don't wanna
we
talk
want
to-
to talk to the. Let's talk to the guy here.
We want to talk to
Can-
more
I'm
civilized
The only one
people.
in the mask off.
Okay, let's.
yeah.
You know, if you need help, you could seek their help. Yeah, if you need help, you could seek their help.
I'm
but-
happy to stand for my own points.
Look, Tony and Nicholas, we're talking. You're not talking to you. Just ignore
all
it.
right,
Speaks
carry
your
on.
credibility.
No, Tony, don't entertain
It
him.
means you
Don't
don't seem like you're a serious person if you won't be transparent.
Exactly. That's what we said before.
I'm sorry, guys. You're derailing the discussion.
No, that's why. But it was good discussion. Yes.
May
Okay.
I put some facts on the table? Okay?
Empirical facts. Empirical facts.
No.
Listen, let's discuss empirical
Allow me
facts.
to state the fact.
Okay. Empirical facts.
Give me a minute and a half to put some facts on the table. I'm not drawing a conclusion as to how to contextualize or evaluate these facts. That's the job of these discussions. But hopefully we can just agree on what facts are, yeah? So here's some scientists. Roger Penrose, he believes in conformal cyclic cosmology, which is that the universe is eternal. Here's a link, if you want it, and you can put it on any of your camera crews to where he says it.
All right.
I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying it's a fact it's his name, it's a fact he got the Nobel Prize in 2020, it's a fact he believes that, and I can show you where to find it if you want to fact check. Here is Frank Wilczek, who has got a Nobel Prize, and he thinks that there were electrons before the Big Bang. I'm not saying he's right, but I can give you a link to where he says it.
Okay.
This is Brian Greene, who's pretty well known, Columbia University Director of Central Physics. He thinks the Big Bang was not the beginning of the universe. Here's the link if any of your camera crews want it. I'm not saying they're not. The only fact I'm stating is that is that man's name. He has made that statement, and that is a link. It could all be nonsense. It could all be nonsense. But I would just like us to agree.
It's not a scientific
We also have
explanation,
Stephen
it's just the opinion.
Stephen Hawking, physicist, debate his idea the universe went on forever. I have a link. Sean Carroll, who was awarded American Institute of Physics significant contribution, etc. He says my best guess is the universe did not have a beginning. I have a link. Brian Cox, a lot of you might have seen. I have a link. He says I strongly suspect the universe existed before.
I want to say something.
Okay. Now, I put these facts on the table, and I do not know if
Brother,
they're
listen.
correct. But as a layman, most of us are laymen, and we have to decide who we're going to listen to.
Can I just show this to everybody?
But
And I say 1 second. I just want to say, this is absolutely fine, but this has nothing to do with the discussion we were having.
our discussion. Do you know the discussion?
No, sorry, 1 second. Because you came in late, maybe you missed it. We weren't.
I don't want to pull goes into a conversation.
No,
No, that's fine.
But
Is this what I said,
these
okay?
things,
Yeah.
by the way,
Perfect.
Tony,
Thank you.
these things are simply facts that we know that these people hold these opinions.
Yeah.
But the discussion was on something different, which is he said there's empirical evidence for the cyclical model.
Okay.
Now,
And all I'm saying is that there are certain scientists who have Nobel Prizes,
Yes.
and who are members of the National Association of
That's
Science, who was a layman, I think I should possibly give a little bit of credibility to, because I am a physicist. I can be logical and I can see self-consistencies. My job is always to look to legitimate sources. Always be skeptical. I'm not saying I
it is still-
but these guys do exist and they
What's
do
his name, by the way?
believe.
What's his name?
Their conclusion is that the universe
Tony,
may be
Tony,
eternal.
Tony,
no,
Tony,
but Tony,
Tony.
here's the thing.
Are those philosophical arguments?
No, these,
they're
because you're making an
scientists.
assertion about physics.
no,
these are
listen.
physicists.
No, okay.
It's the correct field.
But
Is it philosophical argument?
Here's
They're
a point.
physics
Here's a point.
assertions because you're making
You
assertions about
referenced
physics.
you referenced Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
You referenced Lawrence Krauss, and you referenced Roger Penrose. Okay.
Yeah.
Each one of them has actually spoken about not only the physics but the philosophy side of things.
Fine, if you want to discuss philosophy,
Okay,
I'm happy to.
So what I'm trying to point to, and what I tried, Nicholas, right?
Yes.
What I tried to point out is, when we go from where we are right now, talking about redshift and what we observe, to the beginning of the universe, we are transferring from the field of physics to the field of philosophy.
There's an interface, no question.
But when we get right to the beginning, I believe it's philosophy.
I think philosophy is the core discipline.
There you
Don't get
go.
me wrong, okay?
So
And I think
you
the
don't
tool-
disagree.
Okay, we do agree. Okay, I think the core, the tool. Of
And I believe
philosophy-
maths is the purest version of that.
Quite possible. I think the tool of philosophy is inference. Okay, inference consists of induction and deduction linked to an axiom. This is the one tool we're all using, be it in philosophy or the physical sciences. It's always the same tool. So what you've got to work out are what are my axioms. Now, I think an axiom that we all share is, I believe I live in a self-consistent universe. I don't think anyone objects to that, be you Christian, atheist, or
Can I
whatever.
ask a question on
Yeah,
that?
go ahead.
This is why I disagree. Not yourself, and I'm not sure about you, but you definitely don't believe in scientism. When we have people using quantum physics to challenge the idea of self-consistency in the universe, I would say that's baloney. Would you agree with me?
Well, hang on. With the contingency that the question itself may be flawed, because it's a complex question. Provisionally, I think I'd probably agree with you. I think physics is a discipline of physics.
Okay, but I'll ask you, why do you think it's a flawed question?
I'm not sure. I don't want to commit at this point because I do think the question you asked my friend here before was, I suspect you asked him Russell's teapot, which is you can't prove a negative.
No, I didn't.
I don't know if you did. It
But-
seemed to me you might
But
have been asking
let's
Russell's
stick to
theorem.
quantum mechanics here.
Okay.
If someone looks at, I don't know, the many worlds, Copernican, whatever, inference, interpretation of quantum mechanics, and then they use that to challenge something about what you said, this self-consistent,
Inference, the tool of inference.
the tool of inference, and the universe being self-consistent. I would say that question being answered in the affirmative would give away that the person believes in scientism.
You may be right. It is a very complicated way to come.
I don't
to
think it's
a-
complicated. I think it's very simple.
Okay, to me,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find common ground in as much as it's possible, in a way that hopefully people watching the camera can understand.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's essential to really identify this tool of inference and how it works, because it's absolutely ubiquitous to all these discussions. And unless you understand the tool, everything else will just be chaos. Yeah. The
Which is
tool-
why I go back to definitions like you do.
And I think it's important, particularly because I've heard you and other people say you don't believe on inferences from induction, only deduction.
That we never said that.
Oh, okay.
What I said,
Something close to that.
I'll explain and let's see if you disagree. I believe,
Sorry, are you okay with that?
I
Because
believe,
I thought you were doing great. Yeah.
I believe inference as a deduction, conclusions made from inferences are valid. But I believe inferences made from induction can be overturned. However, if someone believes in a very scientific worldview, then they will treat conclusions made from inferences, which are inductive, in a way that are deductive. And a classical example that came about just about now is the discussion between Dennis Noble and Richard Dawkins, where something that was in the data from an inductive point of view, the self-regime perspective, the central dogma and all of that stuff. And that is being challenged by Dennis Noble's systems biology perspective. The
Yeah, you
holistic-
asked me to watch it, and I did,
Yeah.
and it was gemules and feedback
Did you watch it?
loops, and yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I
So,
did, and
see-
then I watched your reaction to it
Yeah.
as well.
With
So
the
I tried to,
geneticist.
and then you didn't turn up for a while, and we didn't get to discuss.
Because I was in Africa.
Okay, so because you were in Africa, congratulations.
So,
But-
look, what I was trying to get to is that that's a classical example where induction has been given a status greater than it should have. And that's what I disagree with. I disagree with people treating inductive conclusions as if they're
Absolutely.
very strong. However, I understand why you're saying this, because people accuse me of rejecting inductive conclusions. I don't.
Okay.
I don't believe you can.
well then it would be very constructive if we could have a conversation maybe now where we both clarify our understanding of that tool and how it works, yeah? Can I give an example of how I think it works, okay? So there's an eternal tool used in all the sciences and philosophy. It's the same tool. If you use it with regard to matter, it becomes the physical sciences. If you use it with regard to philosophy, then it becomes more abstract and conceptual, but it's always the same tool. It works like this. You use an induction, which is you observe something in the universe empirically, and then you see if there's a repeating pattern, because you assume as an axiom you live in a self-consistent universe. So the example Robert Pirsig gives in his book, Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, is you're on your motorbike, you're driving down the road, it goes over a bump, the bike backfires, yeah? Empirically you experience this. You drive along again, it goes over another bump, it backfires, you experience this. It does a third bump, it backfires, right? You've now noticed a pattern of behaviour, and you start to develop an axiom about the bike, a theory, which is this bike backfires when it goes over bumps, yeah?
Okay.
It's a postulate, yeah? It's an idea you have. So you've created an axiom or a postulate about the bike, which you're now going to test. You've used induction to arrive at it. You've got your axiom. Now you're going to travel into the future because you see a bump coming up ahead and you go, I'm now going to use deduction to predict that when I go over it, it will backfire. You test the hypothesis in the future, and if it happens, it reinforces the axiom. And if it doesn't happen, you go, there's something wrong with my axiom, right? Now that axiom can never be 100%. This has been pointed out by Kurt Gödel, this has been pointed out by David Hume, and I think Russell's paradox, that essentially whatever your system of inference is, you're going to need a brute fact assumption. Somewhere at the bottom of all of these inferences will be an assertion of faith. And this is where I'm so keen on religion, despite the fact you think I'm an atheist.
No, I don't
Okay,
think
well, by your terms, I almost virtually am, but I think we both value faith. We understand that faith is pivotal to the entire thing, including the tool of inference itself. So if we can all agree we're using that tool on how to use it diligently, then I think we can move
I don't
forward.
actually disagree with anything you said then. In fact, that view is the view of Imam Ghazali.
Right.
That view is a classic Islamic view. We don't dismiss induction. Shuaib Ahmed Malik, I'm not sure if you've seen him online, he's someone who's written a paper. If you Google his name and Google Imam Ghazali in induction, you will see he's written on this topic as well.
Okay. So ultimately, every human being is going to have to make some assertion of faith.
Yeah. I might just bring up the
Skill is
paper.
in making a wise assertion of faith, because all of your life and your thinking is going to evolve from that assumption.
But here,
So,
the example...
Can I just push back a little bit?
Yeah.
I'm bringing up
It's your
the
show,
paper.
so-
Yeah. So look, I totally agree with you that in the core essential level, there must be some level of faith that things will be consistent in an internally
That's
coherent universe.
one of the axioms. There are
Yeah.
others, because I think Muslims, as a generalization,
Yes.
they have the axiom of self-consistency. They also have the axiom that the Quran is divine revealed truth and it is speaking truth. So they're running with two axioms.
Yeah.
So when they run their inferences, they're seeing, does it tick both boxes? Does it fix with our axiom that the Quran is accurate, and does it fix with self-consistency? And if it doesn't match with either of those two axioms, then you've got to rethink your position.
But I want to point out what I think is very important in your sentiment, right? That when you're describing the backfiring of the motorcycle, right?
Sure.
What you're indicating is the motivation behind how we believe in truth, which is to minimize faith, right?
Yeah.
Because in your example, right, the
Yeah.
reason why you constructed this axiom was because it was based on probability.
Yeah.
The probability of evidence at hand.
Yes.
Right? And faith is the core necessity, maybe.
You want to minimize.
Is it as much as
Are you
possible?
familiar with Donald Hoffman? He's a mathematician, he's out there, and he's very advanced. He says you've got to put all of your miracles at the beginning of your argument. He understands. Even the people now, the scientists, they're also understanding. You can't get away from the faith thing, you can't get away from the necessity
Yeah,
of the
because
miracle.
the example that you brought, you cannot apply it about the existence of the universe, because there is no kind of a pattern that we can go through to say there is a
Sorry,
pattern.
So this is the book you should download. It's for free.
Thank you.
And,
Islam and the Evolution of Al-Ghazali and the Modern Evolutionary Paradigm. Okay.
And you will also find other papers where Shuaib is speaking about induction and its value in Islam.
Okay.
So our classical view does not dismiss induction as, because it's not deductive, we're not going to take it
So
seriously.
could we agree that induction for most things is 99% good, but it's not perfect, yeah? For most living, You know, if every time I drop something, it goes down, not up.
Can I just-
use induction to infer gravity, and we all behave this way.
Can I just qualify that?
Yeah, sure.
I would say in medicine, yes. In engineering, yes. Theologically, no.
Okay. Now the distinction.
What do you think? What do you think?
I think.
Special pleading, isn't it?
I think I don't know, and it may be special pleading. I think that you may be right, but I hope you're not. But what I am confident is when you create a theological or philosophical position that then chooses to interface with the physical science and quote that from that physical science, you are then obliged to obey the rules of that physical science.
I don't agree with that.
Well then you
What's the
need to be
question?
Can I ask a question to him?
What's the question?
A question is giving the paper, yeah? This paper which is talking about the universe is going to be eternity for eternity, which goes against the second law of thermodynamics, where it says that universal entropy has to be increased.
He's not against it. He's the one who was saying about the
Okay, so we
universe.
can
Not necessarily. It could
He's
be a
giving the,
philosophical point.
theory that's universal
or a
existence.
philosophical point.
Okay.
And that-
Would you
we're
agree?
transparent about
Sure,
that
sure,
difference from the
sure,
outset,
sure.
we're good.
Would you agree if I did the latter of what you described, I would be self-consistent?
Yeah, and all self-consistency, I think, is what we owe each other
Yeah.
at a minimum. I don't happen to share your belief that the Quran is literally true,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to go that it's 90% excellent, which for me means it's pretty damn good. Apparently for you, that's not good enough, but we can differ.
No. My point that I was making when you said induction is 99% good or in 1%.
In localized environments,
What I meant by that is that if you want to make conclusions about, say, vaccines, you want to make conclusions about whether a building is safe,
yeah.
you could do that from an engineering point of view or medical point of view.
Yeah.
But when it comes to theology,
Yeah.
we should not be using induction to inform theological conclusions.
Well, I think then I am confused, and let's try and really use this one out. The only tool I have, I believe, is faith and inference.
So
Those are my tools, and you seem to be arguing that I should somehow abandon inference when it comes to theology and philosophy. Inference is the tool, and an intrinsic part of inference is induction and deduction and syllogism and axiom. They're inevitable components.
I think we're talking past each other. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If I looked at say if I existed 150 years ago, this was a time when certain people were of the view that the Earth is 6-something million, it's a couple of million years old, it's not billions. Now if I made a theological point saying God created the Earth 6 billion years ago, 10 billion years ago, if I made particular theological inferences based upon the current scientific understanding, that would be wrong. That's what I'm pointing to. And this has happened in the past, by the way. People have used things in science and said, well, this is what God intended, this is what God wanted. And I believe that's wrong.
You may have a point. I'm trying to think of something I can say that I think we'd agree on. I think the function of logic and facts is to eliminate bad ideas. Yeah? It doesn't identify necessarily what's totally true, but you can use the tool of inference to eliminate things which are very likely to be bad ideas. Yeah? Could we agree that that's its function? Yeah?
No, I think that's
if
pretty
somebody has
reasonable.
if somebody comes with a philosophical, theological axiom that the Earth is 7 million years old, and then because they're interfacing with physics, and the physics evidence says, well, if when we use this tool, we honestly discover it's like 8 billion years old, then I think the theological axiom, if it's wise, should cede to the factual axiom about the physics. It doesn't mean that at the ethical level or the theological level, the metaphysical level, it's got to do anything, but it should cede to the pure brute physics of it.
Yeah, and this I've been saying for years.
Okay.
And this is something which I believe anybody that subscribes to a scientific worldview, somebody believes in a sort of hyper-imperialistic worldview, would not agree to.
Okay, well then I'm not on their team.
No, I know you're not.
Okay,
But
but
what I
equally,
do,
I'm not-
but I do debate people who do believe in that type of empirical scientific
Okay, can I
worldview.
put it to you, they're low-hanging fruit. Okay, those people, I think, they're missing the point, you're right. Scientists...
But there's a lot of them,
Okay, I'm sure there's a lot of them, but insofar
and they
as
happen to be
lucky-
new atheists as well.
Luckily, you and I
What
aren't them,
about
so to get the
Nicholas,
best
by
out
the
of
way?
our
He was
discussion-
involved.
Yeah.
He was involved in
Oh
the
yes,
discussion.
yes.
We don't want to
Science,
neglect him, by the
you're
way.
not into scientism either, are you? You
I'm not even
appreciate
sure what
this.
you fully mean by that.
Scientism means, I think, that you believe in a totally reductionist view of the universe, which would eliminate all of the metaphysical components which seem to be inevitable.
Your
I take
epistemology
the
starts and
hypothetical
ends with
consciousness
science.
to be the key one.
Yeah.
I believe consciousness.
I believe consciousness is an illusion.
Okay, but wow. Okay, we disagree on that.
We do.
Okay, I think you and I would both disagree with this.
Firstly, I want to ask you, do you think that's a scientific conclusion or a philosophical conclusion?
I think it's a scientific one.
Okay, why?
Because you would need evidence to beg to differ.
Okay, so here's where I think you need to look back at the question that I asked you. I asked you, is it a scientific conclusion or a philosophical one? You said a scientific one.
Yes.
That means you believe consciousness, your concept of consciousness is empirical.
No, I believe that the absence of my consciousness is empirical.
But that's a slightly different point to what I was
It
making.
sounds silly, but
No, okay.
yeah.
So, Tony, I think we're going to agree. We're probably going to agree here. Would you say? Let me ask the same question, Tony.
Sure, thank you. Well,
Consciousness.
sorry, that's not fair. I've got you holding it.
I asked Nicholas a question which I'll ask you, so we understand where we're coming from. I asked Nicholas his idea that consciousness is an illusion. Is it a scientific conclusion or a philosophical conclusion? He said scientific one. Do you believe it can
No,
be?
I don't believe that's a scientific conclusion.
Yes.
I think that's a metaphysical conclusion.
Yes, and that's my view.
Okay? And I think also it's inconsistent because when I say
Can you give me water if you
when
have any
you
water?
say
bro?
consciousness is an
Is
illusion,
there any water bottles here?
that doesn't mean you deny that
Sheikh, is this yours?
consciousness is happening as a point of
There is one
time.
here.
You don't
I have
deny
it.
the reality of
Thank
time,
you.
yeah? You simply think it's delusional. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, well that's different. I don't think it's contestable that I am. I think qualia, the experience itself is definitely happening. That my diagnosis of what the experience is may be mistaken. I'll use inference, I'll use intuition, but I can always be wrong. We always know that, yeah? But the one thing I can surely be 100% sure of is I am.
Yep.
Yeah?
I
And
agree.
don't know how I don't know how many. You just said that we all agree. So it's good, we've got these things we agree on. We agree I am is a definite statement. We agree how the tool of inference works. We agree the tool of inference has flaws and can't be perfect and will require a brute assertion, including one of faith. And hopefully we can agree that
Not
then we
necessarily
should
the
build
faith
our
one.
assertions of faith as wisely as possible. For example, if you start building models of the world in your head that need 200 assertions of faith, I don't think you're being parsimonious.
Yeah, I agree.
You
So
wanna
let's
trim it
make
down.
sure Nicholas is following the trail of thought because we have a lot of these discussions in the park. So his point and my point is your idea that consciousness is an illusion cannot be scientifically justified. It's a philosophical point you're making.
Okay. So the reason why I say it's scientific is because with my understanding of science, right, that science is having this loyalty to measurable, repeatable phenomena, right? And when I say that consciousness is an illusion, is because there's no evidence or measurable, repeatable phenomenon to make a distinction between what is real consciousness versus,
Okay,
synthetic consciousness.
The problem there is you've already assumed your conclusion. You've assumed consciousness has an empirical basis.
No, I'm assuming that. So from my worldview.
So
right,
wait. Let's just slow down. Does consciousness have an empirical basis?
No, it can't.
No, then it cannot be disproven empirically if it does not have an empirical basis.
Okay, so
Do you see the point there?
my belief system is based off of evidence.
No, but
so
first-
everything
no.
isn't true until there's evidence for it.
No, but
Then
look,
your belief system has to be limited. If you're only willing to accept empirical evidence, you can never cover the
Yep.
Uh,
entire cosmology
Yep.
and the entire metaphysics
Yep.
because you've precluded things which are not empirical. I can never prove you're in there. You can never prove I'm in here. I intuitively and inevitably know I'm in here, and I have considerable faith that you are in
third
there.
person consciousness.
And I discard the faith.
Okay.
I'm just saying I don't know what I don't
You
know.
can't discard the faith. You're using it. You are having faith that I'm in here and he's in there. We're not just all
It's inescapable.
philosophical zombies. Yeah? We
Faith
might
is
be
inescapable, my
That's
friend.
my position, right? Is it when you're saying, "Oh, I'm in here," I'm like, "Do I really know that?" Right?
No, I'm not saying you know it in the epistemological sense of 100% certainty, because you can't. What I'm saying is that you know intuitively you are, and now you're inferring that I am as well, and it's a very good bet.
Can I? Okay, look. Here's where.
Meaning
Look,
the difference
look.
between you and I, for
Look.
example, when you define yourself that I am,
Yeah.
define he is, and you are, that means you
Yeah.
literally have the consciousness to decide this.
So look,
That's the
so look,
point.
Nicholas.
Which is that
Me and
empirical.
him agree on something
Yes.
that we disagree with you on. But I'm now going to propose something that you may both disagree on. I believe the best explanation of consciousness is Allah, God. What do you think of that idea?
I don't believe in consciousness as such.
Okay.
Wow.
So,
But you
okay, wait.
You said you think it's an illusion, and that sentence predicates on it, in some sense, existing. So you do believe in consciousness.
I believe that there is a myth of Santa Claus, but I don't believe that there is a Santa Claus.
No, we're not asking you to diagnose. You may be dreaming now, you may be in a matrix, but experience is happening to you. Irrefutably and intuitively, yes? What you're experiencing now is not nothingness. Therefore, it is something.
If your definition of consciousness is just
I'm
experiencing
talking
things,
pure qualia. I think John Vervaeke calls it valence qualia.
Yeah.
It's the first wave of qualia, and Daniel Dennett says it's before you've diagnosed or identified it. And then we've got filters in it, biological, conscious and unconscious, that try to diagnose what's coming in. But the fact that stuff is coming in is irrefutable.
so I'll validate the idea of sensation and experience, but I don't want to validate the idea of like will and free will and stuff.
We're not that's way
We're
down
not talking
the line.
about the will.
Great. Okay.
We're not drawing any of those conclusions.
Yes.
They're up for grabs and to be discussed.
If by consciousness you just mean experiencing things, then we're in agreement.
Does that work for you now? We've got a foundation. That
I mean,
works.
I think that's an okay way of beginning the conversation, but I think the problem that I had with what you were saying earlier is by pretty much most of the statements you said so far in these conversations, it seems like for you, science is the adjudicator for all truth.
I believe evidence is, and that science is
But
only
you-
a tool to that.
But you've always defined evidence empirically.
Yes.
So that basically means for you, science is evidence, is the only evidence.
Well, science is the tool to gaining evidence.
Right, but evidence has always been defined by you from an empirical perspective. And that's the problem of scientism. I think you're suffering from it.
Scientism doesn't understand the limitations on its purview.
Yeah.
There are certain things, pure subjective experience is not empirically quantifiable. I cannot know that my wife loves me. I live my life and have to live my life with a belief that she does or doesn't. In reality, if I could get in her head, she either does or doesn't to a variant. It's not does she love me or doesn't me, it's to what degree does she, yeah? Now I make a guess as to how much she does. There is a truth in her head I can never see. It's not empirically quantified, but I live my life on the basis of these profound assertions of faith
Okay.
and probabilities, yeah? All of
Which
us
is not
do. You have no
empirical,
choice.
basically.
Which,
is not
by the way,
empirical.
I want to get to a point. I wanted your thoughts, and Nicholas, your thoughts. If consciousness exists, do we first all agree consciousness exists?
Now we do.
Okay.
Now we
so,
do, yeah?
So,
All
so
right.
now,
fine, that's fine, that's fine.
now, I may say something. I'm not sure if Tony agrees or disagrees. I believe the best explanation of consciousness, firstly, has to be something metaphysical, not scientific.
Okay.
I'm using modal logic, so I'm going, I can see about 3 different possible universes. One of them is the one you describe. I can't discount it. I want to keep thinking it through.
The one with God.
I believe the options seem to be consciousness is either bottom up, yeah, in other words, it arises as an emergent property of matter.
Monism.
And monism, no, sorry?
As in, the mind is the brain at work.
Yeah. So we start with base matter, it upgrades, it becomes, organisms.
I'm a
and then
dualist,
it
Cartesian dualist, so I would say that's not true.
Okay, fine. Nonetheless, there's a top-down, there's a bottom-up model which is increasingly
Complex.
popular, yeah, because it yields a lot of predictive power, like anesthetic and stuff. It shows the entanglement between neurology and consciousness is clearly demonstrated by the fact that if I take general anesthetic, it will knock out my consciousness. So I can't deny a level of entanglement. That
Okay.
doesn't mean it's a one-way trip.
Okay, sure.
Second
But,
option.
okay,
Let me do the 3 and then
but I just want to say one small point about this. When someone challenges monism like I do,
I don't believe it's monism, so
No,
we're
no,
using
no.
different language.
sure, but the mind is the brain at work. Let's call it that.
Okay.
I believe when someone like myself, who's a Cartesian dualist, we will never deny the entanglement,
Good.
and we will never allow entanglement to be a sufficient argument for the mind is the brain at work.
Agree. I agree.
Oh,
with
you agree. Fantastic.
All I'm saying
Fantastic.
is, I'm trying to put facts on the table.
Sure.
And then
So
we
what's the
circle
third
them.
option?
Well, the fact that was the first option. But putting the facts on the table, we agree there seems to be a causal connection between the brain and the mind.
I agree.
It doesn't mean it's not two-way traffic. It doesn't mean the brain is the prime mover. But there's clearly, I think we can empirically agree
No
there's
one
a
denies
connection.
that. No one
okay,
denies
so
that.
let's put that on hold as a fact we're going to have to work with. The second option is the top-down, which is the more traditional religious view.
God,
which
Allah,
is
yeah.
sort of like the soul descends into the body, drives
God
it around
creates
for a
it, yeah.
while, and then it returns, yeah. And ironically, in the sciences of people like Donald Hoffman and Bernardo Castro, and others, they're increasingly going, look, we're not making too much ground now with a bottom-up model. Maybe we need to look again at the top-down one. They're coming full circle back to kind of where you guys are to an extent, but there are certain things they profoundly disagree with you about. That's the second
And they're not religious, by the way.
They're not religious. Oh, actually, I would say they think they are. They're religious the way I am, maybe, some of them. The third way of looking at it...
Hoffman is not... Okay, I mean, as in, they're definitely not religious from my perspective.
Viveki, I would argue,
Yeah.
is, and Bernardo Kastrup, I would argue, is, and so on. Anyway, the other way of looking at it is panpsychism, which is that matter and energy are intrinsic, matter and consciousness are intrinsically aspects of the same thing. So it's not bottom up, it's not top down, it's all simultaneously in a way we can't wrap our head around.
Can I just add a little qualification to that?
Yeah.
As a Muslim, I believe in a type of panpsychism and dualism.
Okay.
So you can believe in both.
Okay.
So for example, as a Muslim, we believe everything is worshipping God, including rocks and trees. So there's a level of consciousness in everything. The ground that you walk on will testify for or against you. Do you understand? So we can have a panpsychism perspective married with a dualistic perspective.
I totally support that. I think the wise thing to do...
So you're
Again,
Say your shahada, man. Just say your shahada.
Total
And you're supposed to be
logic,
Muslim
when I'm
then?
going, I don't know. I think humility is a good thing, and ultimately I don't know. So what I should do is keep inspecting it from all 3 points of view. The same way I might take 3 photographs of you from different angles, and they should all match. So they all seem like useful avenues of investigation. Religion brings a top-down view to the table that I think we would be unwise to just discard as silly superstition, because it's richer than that. The science is bringing clear empirical data which seems unavoidable.
We can't ignore that.
And they will limit the facts that we should consider, pleasantly or unpleasantly. And the panpsychic version is so wild, but strange.
Why is it wild? I wouldn't agree with that.
It's totally counterintuitive to me.
I think it's totally intuitive.
Okay, good for you. Great, you may be ahead of me. But I think if you bite that bullet, thereafter virtually all the inconsistencies disappear. So if you value self-consistency in your axiom, panpsychism actually does a pretty damn good job of squaring.
Sure. I just want to say something about the word wild. Now, me assuming this works on Mars, right? You have gravity on Mars.
Yeah.
That's not wild, is it?
No, that's a perfectly reasonable projection.
So if in this grey matter, this cranium,
Yeah.
we have consciousness, why would we believe there's not consciousness in the tree or rocks or all around us?
No, you agree, but where it's interesting then is, I'm not living as though this thing has any properties of quality. I'm not living as though it cares or feels anything or has a will or a soul or a destiny. If the panpsychic universe is accurate, I've got to fundamentally change the way I look at it.
I just want to share something with you.
Yeah.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the tree example, the tree used to cry. Can you give that example?
There is one single hadith at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that he used
Sorry,
to
could you
give.
shout a little bit?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. The Prophet, peace be upon him, he used to give his sermon on a piece of a tree, yeah, like a piece of a tree. So all the time he used to give his sermon there, and then the companions, they suggested to him to build something for him, so he could climb like 3 steps, that he could go and give his sermon there. Then he started doing that, and they kind of neglect or just avoided using that tree piece to give sermon on. And then they start hearing sounds, like sound of a cry or something like that from that tree, from that piece. And then he placed his hands on it, and then he said, and that's why many of the companions, they said that tree missed the Prophet, peace be upon him.
It was crying.
And like crying, like the sound of crying from that piece of the tree. There.
The reason why I brought that up is because you
This
said...
is nice.
No, the reason why I brought that up is because you said panpsychism would lead to a view where objects have feelings. We as Muslims believe objects do have feelings,
Okay,
like a
that
tree.
to me is a revelation. Okay, I didn't know.
Well,
you thought
he is
that.
a prophet.
I would say it instantly sounds to me like pantheism, which I thought you.
No,
would
not
be-
pantheism, panpsychism.
Yeah, it's not that they're.
It's not a million
they're
miles from
divine.
pantheism.
It's very far away.
I have a
Okay,
question.
To be continued. Go on.
So
God created everything, and everything has consciousness is very different to everything is God, which is pantheism.
I
Two different views.
I understand.
There's panentheism as well. Hang on, let's not go down that rabbit hole for now. Your point. Sorry.
So, if you have this
Thank you for
panpsychism
that.
and you believe that there's this idea of consciousness which exists in things, not just people, right? Now, there immediately what becomes a problem for me is how do you limit these things, right? When I look at people, right, psyche makes perfect sense because it's consolidated within the body, right? If I'm going to be conscious, I can agree with the idea of consciousness as sensations because there's a me, right? I'm not her, right? I'm not him. And so there's my consciousness, her consciousness, his consciousness. Now, when we're talking about objects, right, when does this dirt become that mountain? When does that mountain become that stream, right? When does the atmosphere become...
Sure.
Yeah.
The way I would answer that is, firstly, it's a brilliant question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer at all, but I believe it doesn't make a difference to that you having you not understanding what is the demarcation of one consciousness to another. It's not a defeater to the idea of panpsychism.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a defeater. The reason why I bring it up is because it seems to be more conforming to the consistency of my view, right? That consciousness seems to just be an emergent phenomenon of us having brains, right?
I would say you are making an exception for the humans and not for any other living thing.
I would.
And in a way, I would say that's not being self-consistent.
I would include other living things on that. So I believe that dogs are conscious.
What about a rock? Say a rock.
So rocks don't have brains, and I believe that it's an emergent function of brains.
Fine. So a rock is made of what exactly? At rock bottom, what is it made of?
Different minerals, right?
Then what's underneath the minerals?
They're inanimate.
Inanimate.
We have two substrates. We have a substrate which is organic and a substrate which is inorganic.
Yep.
And I live my life as though inorganic stuff like plastic and rocks do not have any level of qualia.
Right.
A panpsychic position would say that I'm wrong and that should adjust my perspective. If I did do that thing, it feels very counterintuitive, but it would square all of the inconsistencies that I can see in the world problem.
Okay, but here's my question. Why is it counterintuitive?
I honestly don't know. I can look you honestly in the eye and go, it doesn't feel that way.
That's fine. No, I actually respect
And
that
it
because
feels very difficult to feel any differently about it.
what I would say to that, Tony, for me, it feels the same feeling that you have that is counterintuitive. I have a feeling that is intuitive.
Well, then you may be ahead of me. If you're right, you may be ahead of me. If it's true, then I would like to have that intuition. Okay? And it's not like I just don't have any respect for the physical world and nature and beauty and whatever. I do, and I like to romanticize it, but I do demark important lines where
Okay.
the human life is more
Can
important.
I just add something? Can I just add something to this? This is purely. I'm not making a justified argument. I'm not even giving you reasons. You said romance, right? If somebody believes in a pragmatic worldview, there is nothing more beautiful than the idea of panpsychism from a romantic point of view. It's the most powerful perspective, which is why it's such a. If we are to live our life in a way that's the happiest, and we don't really care about truth. Now, obviously, I believe it's true. Even from that perspective, it's better to believe in panpsychism than not believe in panpsychism.
It's like Kant's rule about will it to be a rule, live in a way that you would will it was the law. Are you saying that? You're saying maybe we should live as though we're in a panpsychic universe?
No,
even if we're not.
I'm not. I'm saying if someone is a pragmatist, I'm not saying they should. I'm saying your fulfillment in life is you're more likely to be happy if you subscribe to that perspective than another, if your goal is ultimately
I can
happiness.
see it. Simultaneously, I do want to be a realist, and I want to stick within the facts, and I always want to look at the strongest counter-argument to whatever I believe.
But can I just add something? When I speak to certain people who are liberals, they will always go back to pragmatically what feels good. But it doesn't feel right. There's a lot of feelings involved.
I'm very left-wing, and I actually despise the idea of just doing what makes me happy. I'm very motivated by the idea of doing things that cause me suffering, but ultimately result in growth, me becoming a better person.
But
right?
a lot of liberal philosophy and a lot of liberals themselves go back to emotional arguments and feelings. Which is why you see a lot of these clips online where, liberal snowflake and, libs of TikTok, like, it all comes across because a lot of the arguments are emotional. By the way, I don't disagree with emotional arguments necessarily. I'm not saying they're rational. But if someone makes an emotional argument and they say, I want to live my life in a way that's going to make me the most happiest, and they're making an emotional argument, I'm saying to that person, having a psychic view is better than having a view that nothing has consciousness.
I suspect the idea that nothing has consciousness is great. Yeah. Because each individual...
Nothing apart from us, I mean.
Okay. Well, I think most of us agree that animals probably have some level of consciousness, yeah?
No, I definitely believe that.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So, I agree with
By the way, you should agree with that, because if you believe in the standard Darwinian view, pretty much, right?
Hang on. When we say the Darwinian view, I believe that evolution is a functional mechanism. I'm a layman, I don't know. You studied the subject.
No, what I mean is, for example, I believe humans are exceptional within nature. I believe your perspective is we're not exceptional within nature.
I have sufficient romantic idealization of nature itself that I don't find it quite as
Sure.
problematic for us to emerge.
Sure.
I do
And we had this
believe
conversation.
we emerged from apes.
So if that's the case, then apes and fish and reptiles, there should be a gradient of consciousness.
I would assume this is it. You start with a single atom, you climb the ladder to a full-blown human being, and as you climb it from an amoeba to a trilobite to a fish to a lizard to, whatever, we can all agree that either consciousness is always present in that continuum, in a panpsychic sense, or it must enter the picture at roughly some point. Yeah? And
I don't agree with the latter view.
Really?
Couldn't it
I believe
happen
consciousness
instead?
is always there.
Okay, if you're panpsychic and you believe it's omnipresent, fine.
Yeah.
Can you agree that if you're
And I believe the best, and what I want to go back to is, and I want you guys to challenge this view. I believe the best explanation of consciousness, whether it's panpsychism or not, is God.
I think
What do
God
you think
is
of-
definitely on the table as a contender, but I keep the definition.
I
of
believe
God.
it's not on the table. I believe it's the only explanation.
Okay, well, I'm just so we can compare.
That,
I
that,
believe.
the absolute, that as Muslims, let me just kind of give you this.
Yeah.
As Muslims, we believe that in the absolute existence is the existence of God.
Yeah.
And that's why it's something which is undeniable. That's how, and everything that goes around it. And if you put it, you see here, it's like a puzzle, but there is a main part that everything that comes around it. So the main thing, the main concept for us as Muslims is the existence of God and believe in this God and submit to His will. Then everything that lays around it. So that's for us as Muslims. That's why you will find all our arguments, and that's with the scholars of Islam and scientists and all of these Muslim scholars who literally studied science. Islam doesn't contradict science, basically. But Islam,
Now,
and as well.
at this point, we might end up fundamentally disagreeing because I've actually produced factual evidence of scientists of note who definitely disagree with things you say. I'm not saying they're right, but the assertion that you agree with, I mean, they disagree with.
So
you.
I just want to say something, right?
And that's just the beginning of it.
Science and the conclusions of science can contradict what the Quran is saying, like this example of the beginning. Like, for
These
example,
ones.
we can
This
all
is the cosmology. Yeah.
we can also go to evolutionary theory that contradicts the Quran. So I don't think the argument is there's always a harmony between science and the Quran. There can't be.
No, there isn't.
The point being made is there's nothing in science that can be used to disprove the Quran. There's a different point being made.
There's nothing in
and as
science
well
that
the
can
facts.
be... No,
The
no,
facts.
you're right, because you can't prove a negative and
Yeah.
Falsifiable.
yeah, we're back on Russell's paradox. However, what you
can I just
prove
get-
a negative,
can-
I discount.
can I just give-
can refute contradictory assertions, and if an assertion in any book contradicts the physical evidence, I would be wise to at least.
Let me
keep those
give you an
options
example.
alive.
You see the sun. The Quran mentions the sun has an orbit.
Yeah.
Previously, going back 60, 70 years, that would have contradicted the consensus of scientists. It was understood that the sun is stationary. Later on, we found out the sun actually has an orbit around the Milky Way galaxy. So the Quran was correct. So you can have a scientific consensus which turns out to be wrong, which is why I'm so adamant in using the philosophy of science whenever someone tries to use scientific arguments against the Quran.
Scientists never asserted that the sun was still. The
They
ancient
did.
Egyptians had known that there was an orbit around the Earth for a very long time.
No, they did.
They did.
We're not saying the Earth doesn't go around the sun. That's a different point. We're saying that the sun is stationary. That's the view that scientists, the physicists held in the beginning of the 20th century.
Ancient Egyptians proved that that there was an orbit for like.
For the sun goes around the earth.
No, that the Earth goes around the sun.
That's a different point. That's a different point.
But he's talking about
He's not talking about, by the way.
Oh, around the center of the universe, you mean?
Yeah.
Ah, I see.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
yeah, so the point is, what we say, all of these ones, yes, the brother is talking about like science hypotheses and science, for example, theories that's presented by scientists. I'm talking about facts, things which is fact, natural facts. Now I believe, as a Muslim, that Quran doesn't contradict the natural facts. The facts, beyond any doubt. Like, for example, when we talk about facts, it's as much as the sun rises from the east, for example, or, for example, we observe the sun rising from the east. That's fact for us, yeah? Now, yeah, that's in regard to our observation. So for us, the Quran doesn't contradict with these facts. Now, of course, we might have at certain time that there's kind of consensus between scholars about certain theories. For example, nowadays we find there's consensus, for example, agreement between scientists about, for example, Darwin theory and other things, even the Big Bang and all of these things. Now here, this not necessarily, even though I disagree with both of them, for example, but at the same time, there might be a time in the future that they are proven wrong. For example,
This is possible.
yeah, it's possible.
However, can I contextualize that?
Yeah.
All of our assertions were playing a scale of probabilities, yeah? Although it's possible, I don't think it's probable. And a wise man will play the higher probability without discounting the fact, assuming it's certain. I'll keep the smaller probability alive.
But I think there's one thing important. A wise man should make conclusions of probabilities based upon his worldview.